So again, welcome. I want to let you know that we are going to be covering working with tables in the version of Word 2016. What we will be looking at is how to create a table, and then we're going to work with the table, resize it, and adjust and align the text wrapping. Then we're going to take a look at the individual cells, and we're going to learn some formatting, how to split the cells, and how to insert or delete rows and columns, and how to adjust their height and width. Then we'll take a look at some of the drawing tools that are associated with tables, and working with how to sort, create a formula, maybe add some shading, some borders, and last but not least, taking a look at what table styles are. So the first thing I want to do is explain that I, on purpose, have a blank sheet here. And the reason it's blank is because we are going to create a table from scratch. And there's many different ways that we can create a table. So I'm going to start with pretty much creating it. And the first one is under the Insert tab. When you want to create a table, you go to the Insert tab, and there's the table icon. So when we drop down the drop-down arrow, it gives us this little gallery, and the first thing you see is all these squares. And if you take your mouse pointer to it, you can see that it will create the table for you as you drag across it. Now the 3x4 table, that indicates that there are 3 columns by 4 rows. That's how it's read. So if someone says, oh, I need a 5x6 table, you're going to know that that's 5 columns by 6 rows. So that's how the syntax works. So this is our very first table, which we're going to create just by clicking, highlighting, and clicking, and the table is now inserted. Once the table is inserted, you can see that our ribbon has changed up at the top here. It is now Table Tools. And we have 2 tabs. The Design tab, which really controls the design of the table, the way it looks. And then we have the Layout tab. And what the Layout tab does allows us to modify how the table is put together. So we can insert rows or columns, we can delete rows and columns, we can erase specific lines, or we can split the table or split and merge cells. So all of that is done here, as well as text alignment and creating formulas, repeating header rows. There's nothing worse than having a document that's in a table and you go to the page 2 and there's no header row at the top to tell you what column that you're looking at. That's what the repeat header row does. And then converting to text. So if someone gives you a table and you need to be able to work with the contents of the table, the actual data itself, you can click on the table, go into Table Tools in the Layout tab, and convert that table to text. Now you can manipulate it, put it in the format that you need. Perhaps you wanted bullets or a numbered list rather than a table. You can also do it the opposite way, which I'll show you. You can also convert text to a table. So we'll take a look at both of those. That's one of my 4 different ways. So we have the first one, which is, this is just going in and inserting a table. So I'm just going to put a little note here, inserting table, using the highlight method. So you can see there is the paragraph marker. I want to mention that. I keep my paragraph marker or my hide and show codes on all the time. It tells me the placement of where my cursor is, if there's an extra space, the end of a paragraph. And you can see these little round square things. It's like a round circle with little corners on them. That tells you that that is the paragraph or the beginning of the cell. And as you hit enter in a cell, that will actually move down. So a paragraph marker would be put into it, and then that ending icon, that's the end of the cell. That's what that indicates. So it's easy to manipulate your table if you have your show and hide on all the time. So the next one, oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is when you create a table, if there is not a paragraph already, let's go ahead and do this. You want to make sure, I always add an extra one there. And the reason is because once that table is created, you can't get beneath it to add text. And that seems to be a bit of a problem that people have called in. They're like, I created this table, but every time I hit enter, it's creating a new row. It's not giving me my paragraph marker. So I always create one, so I have that little extra paragraph marker there, and now I can create another table. So the next table that we're going to do is the insert table. And this time it's the actual insert, not highlighting. This is going to be using a dialog box. So if you like to work with dialog boxes, this insert table is the one for you. We click on the insert table, and now it's going to ask me questions. I answer the questions. It will then create my table. So we're going to create a 5-column by 2-row table. So let's make this a little more interesting. Let's make it 5 by 6. So now I'm going to have 5 columns by 6 rows. The second portion of it is the auto-fit behavior. Now once a table is created and you've clicked in it, there's that design and layout tab. That's where this information is contained on the ribbon. But using the dialog box, it's sort of nice and packaged together, so you don't have to wait until after you create the table before you can decide on how the table is going to behave once you add text to it. So the first one, it says fixed column width, which means it's going to, auto is the default width, or I can choose, I want it 1 inch. And that means every column is going to be 1 inch. If I say 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, and it will make it the same throughout the entire table. Auto means it's going to be the default length, but at the same time, as you add text to it, it will automatically adjust, hence the word auto. If I put in a point or a size, 1 inch, once I got to the 1 inch width of my column with text, it would wrap my text. So it's going to fix, it's going to lock that column into a specific size. Then you have the auto fit to contents. This works really well if you are taking a bulleted list and you're going to be creating a table with it, but you want to make sure that the contents are on, each one has their own individual cell, perhaps maybe in 1 row. You don't want that automatic wrapping happen. So it will make the column as wide as the text. And then the last one is auto fit to the window, which really plays a role with your margins up at the top. So I'm going to show you, just for dramatic purposes, I'm going to auto fit my table to the window. So it will automatically make my columns the exact same size. If I want to never have to fix this again, I can just check that and it will automatically keep these settings for all future tables. So I click OK, and there's my table. You can see it's from margin to margin, and all of my columns are equal length. So I'm going to go ahead and do this again with another one. And this time we'll do 4, and we're going to do an auto. And you can see that one will also go column to column. I wanted to adjust the size. By default, it tries to go to column. So let's do this by 1. And you can click OK. So now each of the columns are 1 inch. The last one is auto fit to contents. I can't really show you because I don't have contents yet. But if I had contents, it would. Let's try this. So I'm just typing this. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to go, and now I'm going to do another kind of table. And this one is convert text to table. So it's going to take my highlighted text and it's going to convert it into a table format. You can see it says split a single column of text into multiple columns. You can separate them by commas, and here I did paragraph markers, but there's different ways, periods, commas, and you can choose that in the settings. So once I do that, the dialog box comes up and it says right now with the way I have this set up, it can be one column with 3 different rows. I can choose multiple columns if I wanted to. I could say I'd like each one of these to be a column header, so I want 3 columns with 1 row. Notice I can't modify the row. I can do the auto, or I can fit it to the content, and this is what separates my text. And I chose paragraph markers. Some people put commas, tabs, or some other code. I click OK, and you can see that the very first cell is as wide as my contents. The second cell is as wide as its contents, and the third is as wide as the third paragraph. So you can have it not equal as well. Those are different ways that you can use the insert table dialog box with its settings to create a table specifically to your size. Now, if you do make a table and you decide later, oh gee, this last one really needs to be bigger, you can always place your mouse pointer on the edge of the table, and you can click and hold that left mouse button down so you get that little dotted line and drag it. So by using the left, the farthest side, the left, I'm sorry, I'm saying left, right side of the cell and or table, it will widen it. So here is the right side of this cell, and now I'm going to widen that cell, but it will reduce the size of the other cells. If I were to take this, what I would consider the right side, because I would like to widen the left side. Gosh, I can't get my left and right. So if I take the left side of a particular cell and drag it to the left, then it will reduce the size of the cell to the left. So it depends on how you want to manipulate your cells by clicking and dragging. So far that we've looked at 2 different ways and some of the options that you can use to modify the cells. If I learn my left and right, it would be a lot easier. And then we took a look at working with some of these tables so far with manipulating the sizes of the cells, or at least the columns, and how we can adjust the size of our columns if we don't use the Insert tab dialog box settings. Another way that we can insert a table is right here under Quick or Draw Table. And what this does is it designs a table by drawing a cell, a row, or a column of borders, and then you can draw the diagonal lines if you chose to. So what it does is it changes my mouse pointer to a little pencil, and when I click and drag, what it's doing is drawing a box. So once I've got the box drawn, then I can go in and create some borders by clicking and dragging from edge to edge. It makes it, and then it snaps it. And there is a column. Now if I go in the middle of this big one and click and drag, you can see I can create a box, or I could do a diagonal. You see I was doing a diagonal there. Let me go back from corner to corner. So I can draw my table. I can also do the same thing with my rows, and I can click and drag, and it will then snap, and then I can let go. And I'm clicking and dragging using my left mouse button. And if I go from here to this corner, it doesn't like that one. It usually only goes corner to corner. Even though it says it will, it won't. So I would have to go and it will do it that way. So that's drawing your table. Now you can see that there's a draw option right here as well. If you already have an existing table, I want to, oh well, the other thing before I jump into that is I can't get rid of this pencil. And everywhere I go, it's following me. I come up here and I turn off that draw table, and then I get my mouse pointers back. So if I selected a different table by putting my cursor inside it, now this table is selected. I can still choose the draw and decide to split my column. Notice that this one went over and this one stayed wide. Sometimes it just adjusts itself, and you can come in, grab that, and match it all up. So now you have a split column. Another way to split your column is to click inside it, and you can see there's split cells, and then it's going to ask you how would you like this particular one cell to be split, and I'm going to say into 2 columns. And so then it split that one column. If I wanted these 3 cells to be merged together as one, I just click and drag and hit merge cells. Now you do need to be a little careful with the merge cells. If you happen to copy and paste, you need to be careful because it's still technically in the background individual cells, but the table has been modified. So when you're copying and pasting, sometimes you might get a little error that says, I can't do this because you're working with a merged cell, and it may make you unmerge it before you can copy and paste it or move it. So just a little heads up on that. So that's how you use the insert above and below and the drawing of the table. If I wanted to come here and hit insert to the right, you can see that it's now inserted a column to the right. And remember how I was saying that merge cell, it's really 3? Because when I drew these 3 lines, it made my table have 3 rows, but it kept this one as a merged cell. So in the background, these go all the way to the end. So when I inserted a new column, it also broke that column into the 3 cells. Now, if I didn't want these lines, that's what the eraser is for. You do have to be in your table, so click inside your table, hit the eraser, and that little spark in the corner of the eraser, that's what you place on the line, and it will click your left mouse button and it will delete. And so now it's just a regular cell. And just turn off the eraser. So it's pretty cool. You can also split a table. So if I had this table, and you can merge tables as well. Remember this paragraph marker between them? Watch what happens when I delete the paragraph marker. My tables merge. Okay, even though they're all different sizes, they all merged. So now if I want to delete my table, make sure my cursor is inside it, I go up into the layout, and I tell it to split the table. And that's where it breaks the table in half and places a paragraph marker in between the 2, so I can add text. It seems like it's going a little bit fast, but there's not a whole lot of steps to do it. So you just have to create the table, and then it's like, okay, what do I do with the table? And you guys don't want to sit here and watch me type text, so I'm just going in and manipulating the columns and the rows and drawing and deleting of the cells. Here's your auto fit. Here's how you size it. And these 2 are pretty cool. Let's go ahead and delete this part. And to unmerge, you click inside the cell, and it should allow you to unmerge it. Well, we can go ahead and just draw the line. Or I could have split them. That splitting might be easier. Let me do the split. I didn't show that one yet. Split the cell into 3 columns so it matches up. So we have different size cells here. I'm going to use the distribute the columns and the rows evenly. Make these online. So when I'm outside of my table, which is the reason why this is gray, just an FYI. Click inside my, they all come back to life, if you will. So now I'm going to determine, I really want this table to be distributed with rows that are equal and columns that are equal. So the first thing I have to do is select them. So you can see that little black arrow that's pointing down. That means it's ready for me to click and hold my left mouse button so I can select the column. So if I select these columns, then I can format or manipulate all of those columns because they're all selected. If I chose just these two, then just these two would be manipulated. So in this place, I'm going to do distribute columns, and you can see that it adjusted it just a little bit. So if I hit undo, you can see one is wider than the other. But they're still different here. If I want to manipulate the entire table to make my columns even, I want to click this little icon up at the top, that little plus in the box. That selects the entire table, and now I can distribute them all evenly. I can do the same thing as long as it's selected with my rows. It will match and make it, I want to say, an average of the entire height. So the border of the table was this big. It was my rows that were different sizes. So what it did is it adjusted the rows evenly, distributing the rows to the size of the table. So it doesn't change the size of your table. It just makes your rows bigger, your cells bigger. So that's how that would work. Resizing, again, you've got this little box down here, and you can see in the very lower right-hand corner when I place my mouse pointer on it, I get a diagonal mouse pointer, double-headed. I click and I hold, and I can drag the whole thing up and rearrange it size-wise, and it keeps it all distributed evenly. So that's inserting and realigning. Now, if I did have text in here, let's try Monday. Oops. And you hit Tab to move from one cell to another. And the same is true if you want to move backwards, is Shift-Tab. So Tab and Shift-Tab. So what happens when I get to the end? Okay, because I have multiple rows here, if I hit Tab, it will take me to the beginning of the next row. If I'm at the end of the table and I hit Tab, it automatically inserts a new row. It does not do that for columns. So in order for me to add an extra column for Sunday, I just click inside my Saturday cell, and over here I'll say Insert, and it will then give me a Sunday, still keeping everything distributed evenly. So now that I have my text, I can come over to the very left-hand side of my table, and you can see my mouse pointer tilts to the right. If I were to click, it will select that entire row. Sometimes you get the black arrow, and that's pointing in a cell. And if I click once, it will only highlight the cell. So these are different types of arrows that you're going to see when you're working with a table. The black arrow and the white arrow. White arrow for the row, the black arrow for the top of the column, and the black arrow pointing inside the cell. Those are different ways that you can select them. Once you select it, then you can manipulate it. So I'm going to go ahead and choose all of my headers. And up at the top here is text manipulation. So right now, this little gray box is telling me that my text is all the way to the top left, to the top and to the left. So if I make my table bigger, it adds more space in there because it's top left. I'm now going to choose center, and this is top, center top, or right. You can go middle, left, middle, center, and middle, right. So that's the most common one, and the other one would be the bottom. So if you ever are dealing with text, and let's say you're using the bottom one, and then you start typing here, let's say training scheduled. You can see that my Monday and my training, my two cells, are sort of like on top of one another. And this would be the purpose of why you would want to change the alignment to give us a little space in there so when you're reading it, it's nice and easy and clear. If you wanted to change the direction, perhaps, of these headers, you want to make them up and down. You can't tilt them like you can in Excel. Excel, you can actually do a 360 degree. This is going to be either up and down either way or left to right. That's it. Notice it widened it when I tilted them up or down, so you may have to readjust those. Again, pointing your mouse pointer to the bottom of a cell or a row, you can then double click. And sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. I'm not getting it exactly. So in Excel, it will go snap it up, and this table works the same way, or you can click and drag. Sometimes it's hard to do it when I'm presenting. So we have our text in here, and I'm going to highlight. I've selected the words, training scheduled, and I've highlighted, and when I hit paste, it puts all of it in there. So it's a little different than Excel where you can click and drag with the fill handle and it will fill it in. This you actually have to copy into the clipboard, select the cells that you would like, and then paste it. And you cannot select non-continuous, so you can't do one particular cell and then come over here and there you go, without using the control. If you use the control, you can select the entire table. So then I can now, don't hit a key. When you hit a key, there we go. Now I can paste that. Make sure you hold that control key down to get the non-continuous. So let's see, we've adjusted the margins. Now, the other thing that we can do with text, you can see that my words are sort of on top of one another. And I really don't want to size my cells, but there is something I can do to add some additional space in here. Inside this layout, we have cell margins. So just like you have a page margin, you can have cell margins. And this will add space between the cells. So I'm going to highlight this entire row of cells, and I can adjust my margins. So right now, the left and the right have a 0.8. I might want to be dramatic and put a 0.25. You're going to see quite the spacing, because that's a lot. And you can see that the text now has a 0.25 in between the text and the margin of the cells, and it applied it to the entire table. So you probably wouldn't do it the entire table, that big, but you can give yourself some space. You can also go into the paragraph, and this spacing before and after, if that's all you need, you can also increase your spacing, and that will then increase the spacing here as well. This one ran out of space, so it's automatically tilting. So just be aware that when you manipulate your table, sometimes it works great and sometimes it just throws it into chaos. But working with the table tools, you have a better chance than working with your standard direct formatting, such as the paragraph. But sometimes if it's just one or two cells, you don't want the padding that's put in there. You just want some space between the text. You can still use the paragraph. I wouldn't do the whole row, so I can do this. And you can see it adds it for the entire row. Okay, so that puts some space in there. This one here will put padding in the whole table. All of the cell margins will be the same. I can allow spacing between cells. I can automatically resize to fit the content so I don't lose that. So that will affect the entire table. So it's a little easier to read when you put space around the contents. So I'm going to go ahead and see what file I want to open up. So I can do some other stuff. And I think it's the sales rep. Let's do that one so we can get some information so we can add formulas. Okay, that actually has it, so I'm going to delete it. So here we have a little table, and it has numbers in it. Now remember, you can always format these as numbers. Right now they're just generic, but the key here is that we want to add them up. I'm going to actually add another row below this, so I'm going to click inside my table, go up to my layout, and I'm going to insert below, and it can be an entire row that will be inserted. Now remember that that row is going to match the row above it. So that's why I have this split here instead of no split. So now I can add me. And I'm going to sell a lot. 10,050 classroom training. So now it could be a really long list. I don't want to have to make this and add it all up. I'm going to have Word actually do it. Most of the time you're going to use Excel, but if Word is the only one that you can use, you can still do the formulas. Up on the Layout tab is the formula. It's a little different than Word because it doesn't give you the address of the cell, like A1, B5, or a range called cells. You can't do that. It's only going to go direction, above, left, right, or down. And because it recognizes there's only text above it, it defaulted to the above. Now it's asking me for a number format. Would I like it to have the dollar signs, or are these percentages, or do I want decimal points? So we'll go ahead and take the dollar sign. You do have different types of functions. So right now it's the equal sum, but if I wanted average, I could then choose that at that point. Now I click OK. You can see that it put it in at 12,650, which it indeed is that, and it also put in that dollar sign. So if I highlight this, it doesn't tell me anything other than that gray indicates that it's a code. So you have to double click it, I think, or if you can right click on it and go into update or edit the field, and then you can get into editing the type of field. Here's your formula, and now you can manipulate it. So just remember that if it's gray, when you click on it, it's a field. Right click, edit or update. So, for example, if I change this one and added another 0, notice it doesn't automatically update. I have to click on it and update field, and it will automatically update my calculation. So it's a very manual item to do. You can also sort when you're working in a table in Word. So you can see that M, J, B, definitely not in order. In order to sort, you select the cells of the information you want to sort, and then under the table tools, you click the sort. So it's going to choose the columns, and then I'm going to tell it to do the columns. Sometimes this is a little tricky because sometimes it doesn't work as clean as Excel does because of the selection. So it says select the cells of information I want to sort. So if I want to make sure I sort, let's just try this for an example. I'm just going to select the last names. Normally when you sort data, you want to make sure that all your data stays the same. So now we come up to the sort, and it's going to ask me sort by column 1. Because I didn't highlight last, it's just naming it. It is text. You do have an option for numbers and dates. And it's using a paragraph. So then if I had something then by, which would be first, and then by number, but I didn't select them. I only selected this one. And now notice it says no header row. If I choose header row, you can see it thinks that the header is the last name. So you want to include the header. Go up to sort, and now it is sorting by last name. It keeps everything in line, even without selecting them. If I was going to do a multiple sort, last name by first name, perhaps we have another person in here. Let's go ahead and insert, and we'll do Baker George. And he only did 5,000. Update my field, and now I'm going to sort, but this time I'm going to choose, and I forgot my headers. Yep, you got to make sure you do all of it this time. Last, then by first, and then by, I don't want to, just last and first. Click OK. And because I included, this is the other thing that I wanted to show, because I included the title, the total, it threw it into the mix. So when you do the selection, do it that way. It kept everything for me, and now George is for Lorraine. If I wanted to sort last, and it's not going to let me do the sales, let's do that one. It automatically chose number, so now it's going to go lower to higher. George to Lorraine, I guess I should have chose the other one, descending on the number, and now I am above him. So sorting works rather well. Sometimes you need to know what to select and what not to select. If you have extra cells in here that are sort of junk, then you're just going to need to select the stuff that you need to include in the sort. Using the calculations, the formula is pretty easy. If I wanted this to be an average, again, highlighting the field, go into edit the field. Here's a formula, and then I'm going to choose, let's say, an average. Let's see, we're going to take that out. Type in average here, and it should work. There you go. So that's the average. You can also insert another one. I think I can do this here. And now it's going to do above. It's not going to skip this. It's going to include it. So if you're going to do an average, just remember it's going to include that. There's no way that you can just select the particular cells. It has no cell addresses. So now that we have this, let's put in here average. And then we're going to delete this particular row. You go up to the delete, and it gives you options of cells for an individual cell, which everything else will shift up, down, left, or right. You can delete an entire column, an entire row, or a table. If you click on a table and hit the delete key on your keyboard, it will delete the contents, but it will not delete the table. The only way to delete a table is to cut it, like Control V, cut, or Control is X. Control C is copy, Control X is paste, Control V is paste, Control X. So, or come here and hit the delete table. Otherwise, you're just going to have this blank table sitting on your page. So I'm going to delete this row, and because my cursor was in it, it automatically deleted it, and that's the average sale. And now I'm going to format it, and this is where I go into the design aspect of it. Notice that my table has different colors here, and if I point to it, it will then change to the design that I choose. Whenever you have a gallery, you always have that little arrow, triangular arrow with the line over the top of it. And when you click on that, it will drop down and give you more options. So I can then choose perhaps this one, which you're not going to see until I click. And so it's got the last name with the borders. I like it, but I don't like everything about it. And this is where I can modify it. So I can keep my cursor inside this merge cell, and I can change the shading. Right now it's this bright red, and if I want no color, you would see that it would disappear. If I want maybe one of these pinks, so if it's going in order, or that color, then I would come down and match that color. You can see that the words here are white because it was a dark color to begin with. I'm going to highlight my text, go to the home, and then I can change the color of my font back to black. So I can manipulate after I've chosen a pre-existing style and customize it to make it more in line with what I want. Here I can then choose the format painter because it's got the black text. I get my little paintbrush, there you can see it, paintbrush with the I-beam. And I'm going to click and drag, hopefully, get it in there, down the 4, and then it made my fonts black, highlighted, and there is the shading. And perhaps I should actually change this to make it the same. So I've manipulated this. I can go back into this table, go back into the design, and I can choose a different one, and it will actually go right back to the way it was. Once you choose one, notice that you do have the, excuse me, you have the banded. You can turn off the banded header rows. And the banded rows by unchecking it. The header row and the first column. So if I wanted this color, but I didn't want that first column, by unchecking it, it fixes it for you. So there's some manipulation that you can do. Also, you have borders. Right now the borders are white. You can change these just as you would in any other type of border situation. You just choose one. So that's modifying an existing word style. If I wanted to, let's see, change the style, I can change it right back to like that black and white. I can clear it. I can modify, which we just did. And based upon once I've done all my modifications, I can then create a new table style and I can name it. And then that way I can use this table style because it will show up here. And it will allow me to apply it. So now this is going to be up in here. There is my new table style right there. If I come down further, there's more styles. The custom one is right here. That's my red table style. And it will take everything off. I don't know why it took everything off. It shouldn't have. I probably didn't check something. So you can save all your hard work and all your styles. I think I had a different one selected. So now I'm going to take this information and I'm going to convert it into text. If I want to clear all formats, I can either use a table style and hit clear, and it will then remove all of the color. You can see that the last, first, and sales, they are aligned. So I can come up here and make them the left aligned. First, you've got to select the entire row. It's easier if you use this little square guy there and put on the grid lines so you can at least see the dotted lines around your table. Much easier to work in. They won't print, but they will help you in manipulating. So now I'm going to select this just to show you what it does, and I'm going to convert it to text. So I'm going to separate each word by the tab. And there, each word is now separated by a tab, and I can manipulate this the way that I want. So, for example, I probably would have put the first name and the last name before I converted it so that it would be easier. So let's try that. Take this table. We're going to delete this here. We don't need that guy. We don't need this. So I'm going to select this. And you notice that I can drag that entire column. See how it's attached to the bottom. And I just rearranged it. Put it out this way. And then I can delete it. It's a little bit cumbersome because you are manipulating a whole bunch of, let's see what happens. Yeah, I figured that would happen. I want the cells. Yes, you can shift left. There we go. So now I have it where it's more likely what I would turn into text. Took some manipulation. Layout, convert to text, and I can separate them with paragraph marks, which means each one's going to be on a separate line, with commas or with other. So at this point, tabs are fine. I can come in and turn back the tab. It didn't give me an option for a space. We actually did. It said other. Let's do that. Do it right. Other. And what you do is you highlight that and hit your space bar. Nothing shows up, but there truly is a space there. And so now it's by space. Space, space, space. The dot means the space. Notice that you're inside a text box. See, so when you have to then cut this out, put it yourself in a paragraph, and when you paste it back in, you're no longer in a text box. You can then manipulate the text any way that you would like. And with this particular tab, I'd probably make it a decimal tab, but for right now, we'll just put in a regular tab. So this one here, So it's at least aligned. Turn that off, and that's what that would look like. So that's just a little bit about tables. I want to do one more thing about inserting a table into Word, which is probably what the real way it would be done. And I'm going to unmanipulate this so I can turn that off. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to open up Word or Excel. Give it a second to open. And I'm going to paste. So this actually pasted everything into one column. And I can actually modify this so that this shows up into two. Let's see. I don't think I really need to do that. But what it will do is we can separate that. But I think this will be okay. I'm going to copy it from Excel, put it in to Word. Notice it is in a table. So if I had separated it, it would have had its own last name, would have had its own column. So you can take existing information from Excel and dump it into Word. It comes in as a table if you want it that. If I don't want it that, you can use the Paste Specials. And the Paste Special has text, which means it will come in as text only. Most of the time, people will take information from Excel because it's easier to manipulate, it's easier to formulate, it's easier to get the numbers, and then you take the information and drop it into Word. But if Word is the only thing that you have, then working inside Word is just as easy as working in Excel if you know how to manipulate the table and its layout. So that's it for today. I want to thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, make sure that you email me or check out our video website.